We are live. Dave, do you want to intro us?
Yes. Happy Sunday morning, everybody. Well, Sunday morning for me because I'm in the Pacific Standard Time. But hello, everyone. Welcome to the Return of the Living Dead announcements webinar. This is just going to be an interactive conversation where we're going to talk about our newest cinematic adventure, Return of the Living Dead. And we have the two creators that are on that particular project, which will be here to answer questions, and then also I get to interview them and ask them a lot of really cool stuff. And then on top of that, we just might have a special invitee come on the stage as well, and hang out with us and talk a little bit about the movie and other things along those lines. So we'll see if that happens. But until then, I would like to allow the two guests of the panel to introduce themselves, starting with you, Goober.
All right. Yeah, I'm Goober. I'm one of the lead developers of Everyday Heroes. Um, I'm sort of supervising on this one rather than taking the lead on writing it. Nick's been doing an incredible job.
All right, Nick, how about you? Please introduce yourself.
Well, thanks for the very kind words there, Goober. I really appreciate that. My name's Nick Lowe. I'm a freelance RPG writer. If you can tell by my horrendous accent, I'm from the UK, so I hope you can all understand me okay. I'm a big fan of the Return of the Living Dead franchise and just 80s horror in general. And I've been essentially working on RPGs for I think it's probably 10 years this year, and I've been really lucky to work on some really cool projects. And this is the latest, coolest project that I've been lucky enough to come on board.
All right, well, Nick, we're happy to have you now. Let's be honest and let everyone know this idea did not originate inside of the walls of Evil Genius Games. Actually, Nick, you brought it to us. So tell me a little bit about your passion for this particular project, what you love about it, and why you reached out to us to see if we can make the game.
Yeah, sure. So originally, I was writing my own RPG, a zombie RPG, which was heavily inspired by The Return of the Living Dead. And if you know anything about those movies, you'll know just how sort of unique those zombies are in that world, and that's something that I'll get into in a little bit. And while I was writing this RPG, I was just like, you know what? Wouldn't it be just really cool if I could, rather than hint at writing a Return of the Living Dead, I could actually see if it's possible to license Return of the Living Dead, which led me to contacting Steve Walsh, and he really liked the idea. But and to Steve's credit, he'll probably be the first person to tell us he doesn't really know too much about role-playing games. He's more of a movie guy. So he was basically said like, look, I like the idea, but I don't have the infrastructure to publish it, and well, if you can find a publisher, then let's get them on board. So that led me to look around a little bit, and it didn't take me long. I came across Evil Genius pretty quick, searching for sort of licensed RPGs. I'm already a fan of D20 Modern, so finding Everyday Heroes was just itself a bit of a treat for me because I loved D20 Modern and I loved what Everyday Heroes was doing. And I just thought, yeah, these are the guys. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And I emailed. I think I spoke to you, Dave, pretty quickly via email, and I spoke to Goober as well via email.
Yeah, it's I'm customer service and tech support and everything in between. So one way or another, emails usually do get to me.
Yeah. So I got in contact with you pretty fast, and you also seemed like you thought it was a cool idea, and we had a bit back and forth, and we basically got you and Steve and me in a call together, and we all seemed on board. And yeah, you guys had the infrastructure, the experience, the knowledge when it comes to licensing a product like that. And yeah, I think the rest is history. We just got together in a Zoom call and decided this was something we all wanted to do.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So from my perspective, it was really neat to get your call because we were looking for a zombie property. So if you think about modern day storytelling, there's a couple tropes out there that you got to kind of hit the button on, right? One is super spies, right? You got to have a James Bond experience. Another is post-apocalyptic. Another is whatever gangsters. And we were always like excited about doing the everyday some sort of zombie thing. Now, me personally, my favorite zombie movie is 28 Days Later. I am a fast zombie guy. But obviously a lot of people love the slow traditional classic zombies as well. And so we knew that this had to be something we wanted to do. And it's so funny. We actually tried for the Walking Dead license. A lot of people don't know this, but we actually know the people who manage that license extremely well. And we reached out to them and like, yes, let's do it. And so they started sending me paperwork. We started going down the path of actually signing the Walking Dead universe. And then they call me back and they go, "Oh, AMC just licensed this to another TTRPG company. They did not tell us. I'm so sorry." And so we were unfortunately unable to go down that path. So this was a very welcome surprise for us.
Yeah, that's good.
It's
I did see
also
the.
it's also very cool that it is a bit different of a zombie thing. Because we do have, your basic zombies in the core book. Like you could already kind of do a Walking Dead style
Sure.
game, and we're gonna be putting out a everyday apocalypse bonus feature soon that'll help with if the world's fallen apart, the wealth is gonna function differently. So you just kind of combine that with your regular zombie stat block, and you're good. What I really like here is that there's a whole bunch of new stuff to dig into in addition to its zombies.
So Nick, would you mind for those of us who don't necessarily have never watched the film or know the film particularly, can you share a little bit about the Return of the Living Dead universe, explain kind of its origin, and then could you talk a little bit about what appealed to you in terms of making this a role-playing game?
Yeah, sure. So it's a little bit tricky to unpack, but essentially, The Return of the Living Dead is a universe in which Night of the Living Dead is the film that we know. So that film exists within the universe of Return of the Living Dead. The difference is that only a few people know this, is that that film was based on a series of real world events that happened. So zombies are real in that universe, but people don't really understand much about them. People would assume that a zombie would be like it appears in the George Romero film, and that's part of the comedy of the film because when they come into contact with the zombies, they realize that everything in Night of the Living Dead is a lie, and that these zombies are nothing like the Romero zombies, and they can't rely on the information from that film. Um, so the biggest difference between Romero zombies and the trioxin zombies, as it's probably the best to call them, is that it's they're created by a chemical. It's not a virus, right? So it isn't something that's passed on via a bite. You only become a zombie if you are exposed to the trioxin chemical. So that's the first main difference. The second difference is that trioxin zombies maintain their sentience, their consciousness, their personality, their memories. They can talk, they can use tools, they can drive cars. A Romero zombie might be able to pick up a branch and smash a window. A trioxin zombie can call itself a cab and then eat the driver when he arrives. They
Mhm.
are capable of planning ambushes. They are aware that they're dead, and they can use that to their advantage. And in many ways, they're much more horrific because the Return of the Living Dead actually gives an in-world universe for why the zombies eat brains, and it's brains specifically in this universe. Okay, so Proaxin zombies don't just eat people; they only eat brains. The reason they do this is because their bodies are in constant pain, the pain of being dead. It actually hurts to be dead in this universe, and you're conscious of that pain. The only way you can relieve that pain temporarily is to eat live human brains because there's something in the brains, whether it's a chemical, an endorphin, it's some sort of painkiller. If you eat a brain, you can temporarily relieve that pain. So that's the main differences between the trioxin zombies and the Romero zombies.
Wow, and that's relatively interesting, right? And one of the other components, I think, of Return of the Living Return of the Living Dead that's really important to understand is that they're almost unkillable. And we've been going around back and forth about licensing horror genres. So, for example, I talked to our community about licensing Jason on Halloween, and everyone was like, "Oh, don't do it, right? Because you can't kill him."
Right.
So, how are you going to deal with the fact that these trioxin zombies are relatively unkillable in this particular role playing game?
So this is one of the first things that we wanted to look at and try to gamify and try to balance because the other big difference is that these zombies are not stopped by shooting them in the head. You can't just cut the head off and the zombie's dealt with. The body's still there; it will still try to kill you. But unkillable doesn't mean undefeatable, right?
Hmm.
So anything, whether it's a zombie or a kaiju or any kind of creature, enough trauma, enough damage is going to render it effectively defeated. So while trioxin zombies are difficult to kill, with enough trauma, with enough explosives, with enough acid, with enough fire, you can eventually render them defeated. And that's a mechanic that at the moment, I think it's got a placeholder name of being overexposed. So the trioxin zombies we're working on a system so in combat the trioxin zombies dynamically alter depending on the damage that's being caused to them, right? So I'll give you an example of this. If you take a chainsaw to a trioxin zombie, you cut it in half, now you've got to deal with a half corpse and a pair of legs that are still going to try and kick you to death. So that one zombie stat now becomes two stat blocks. Okay, if you cut the zombie corpse's arm off, you've now got an arm to deal with that will still try and grab you and trip you up so the rest of the zombie can eat you. So we're dealing with this sort of like dynamic. It's not quite a mutation system, but the zombies will dynamically change. I think another example is if you set a zombie on fire, you now have to deal with a flaming skeleton, which we call like a burning boner. Um, so they constantly shift and change, but eventually, if you do enough damage, you will defeat them. So, for example, going back to the pair of legs that's trying to kick you to death, if you then overexpose those legs, they're effectively rendered useless. We can't get to the point where we're having to deal with shins and ankles and toes that are all trying to kill you. The horrid reality is those pieces are all still technically alive and moving and can feel pain, but they're no longer a threat to the player character.
That just reminds me of Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 quite a bit. Where my brain goes is how universal how first of all how fresh that concept is. I don't think I've seen that in tabletop role playing game. Number one, but the number two is how universal it could be applied. And there's so many use cases where someone could throw that in a homebrew and it could be really fun. So I think that's going to be neat.
I mean, like you say, it works
Yeah,
on
I
something
think
like Evil Dead or
it'll be
Reanimator.
really cool for the Vault Volume 2.
So Nick, you were saying something about the Reanimator?
Yeah, so that mechanic, I mean, you could use it for something else like, H.P. Lovecraft's Reanimator, or like, say, the Evil Dead. It's certainly something that you could apply to other, creatures and monsters for sure.
Yeah. So, and let's just take a step back and talk about sort of the universe of the world. You talked about how it being sort of inspired by true life events of Night of the Living Dead. What are some of the other world building that you have to do in order this world come alive? So, obviously, people think about the punk rock era. Obviously, the movie was made in the I think late 70s, early 80s. So then there is a decade. There's a specific decade that it's happening. But what are some of the other parameters of the world that you're eager to explore in the cinematic adventure?
So Steve Walsh is a good person to ask about this if you ever get to speak to him. So the idea is that the Return of the Living Dead universe plays a lot around with sort of alternative history. So you have the original incident that happens in the 1960s, which inspires the Night of the Living Dead film. Then you've got the incident in the 80s, which is where the Return of the Living Dead picks up, and it carries on throughout history. So Living Dead media really play around with the idea that trioxin in zombies is integrated into our own history. So, for example, Nixon's resignation in the Return of the Living Dead universe, that comes about because I think he's being sort of influenced by the CIA or the KGB over handling the zombie incident. So I think it's really cool to play around with that alternative history and see what we can do with things like rogue states wanting to get their hands on trioxin, how America's enemies, feel about trioxin, what they can do with it. I know this is something that Steve is definitely playing around with in his own sort of like media. Um, Personally, I'm really, really interested in the original 1960s Outbreak that inspired not only Night of the Living Dead, but also this Return of the Living Dead universe. And that's something that I've been working on in the form of an adventure. But for me personally, I just love the zombies. I just love the idea that these zombies maintain their personality. And this is why I think our game has got a bit of an edge over something like The Walking Dead. As much as I love The Walking Dead, you are playing a survivor who has to eat, they have to count their bullets, they have to find shelter. And it's a really good trope. But in Return of the Living Dead, you can play as a zombie, right? I mean, you could either
Oh,
fight the zombies or you can try and eat your friend's brains and be the zombie.
we're gonna get to that next. Yeah, that's a fun twist that I want to touch base on. So don't say too much yet until we get to that
Okay.
subject. Now, Goober, you're an absolute veteran. Not only did you work on the core rule book, but you also worked on half of the cinematic adventures that are out there. And don't tell Sig, some of my favorite as well. So when you work with someone like Nick, what are you looking for? What type of because you're going to essentially be the producer of this product, but what are the elements that you want to have to make a really, really strong, compelling cinematic adventure?
Um, so I got sent like the pitch early on, when you were like, "Hey, does this make sense as a game pitch?" Because obviously you could tell it was a cool, role playing setting and everything, but you were like, does this make mechanical sense? And like basically Nick's document had all the things I would look for, which is like here's the unique new cool mechanics, um and here's how we can take this world and turn it into a game in a way that like preserves the feel of it, um that really really emphasizes what's cool about that setting, but also that like this could be a functional role-playing game. um so like sort of highlighting like here's trioxin and it makes these kinds of zombies that are essentially unkillable. um how do you deal with that in a role-playing game, and how do you make that like a fun and cool thing without diluting it, without making it like yeah, I guess in the lore they're unkillable, but if you do enough hit points they die, whatever. um and I think there was just some really really good insight into like here's how we can make this fun and cool and make these challenges interesting. um so yeah, generally like there's kind of the combination of the setting where um, you want to have a cool and interesting world to play in, but then like what mechanics can we bring in? I'm always thinking about the vault. um, that was something we had planned from the very beginning. It's like we're gonna make these cinematic adventures, but we want to pick ones that are going to be really good for stripping the IP off later and expanding the system in cool ways. So I think that Night of the Night of the Living Dead stuff, Return of the Living Dead, zombies, trioxin and stuff is such like a unique and cool thing. Um, but like you were saying with like the Evil Dead and whatnot, there's a bunch of application for it as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything like that concept. So when you first got the original, or at least the first manuscript from Nick, any particular rules that caught your eye and you're like, this is pretty cool. Like, I hadn't thought about it, or oh, I would have done this way as well. Like, is there anything that when you salivate over when you have your vault eye on it, was there something like you're like, okay, I like this? Can you give us an example?
Yeah, so there's a class in there that is essentially a zombie handler. where you have a companion. So much like our hunter class has an animal companion, the engineer has a robot companion, the networker class from Universal Soldier and in the Vault has a human companion. This class gets a zombie companion.
I love it.
Um, and what I especially like about that is like you got to keep control of it. Um, and like it says a lot of cool things about the setting that there are people who can sort of control these things. I don't know much about the technology. Maybe Nick can talk about that a little bit, but there's basically like a restraining armor kind of thing that the zombie has, so you can sort of emergency stop them, um, which is very cool. You know, this idea that you have like a really powerful sort of weapon that could turn against you if it freaks out,
It gives me a lot
is
of
super cool.
it gives me a lot of Michonne vibes. You know, I think one of Michonne's in The Walking Dead, one of
Yeah,
Michonne's superpowers is that she's always been really good at creating companions out of zombies. In fact, I just got finished watching the new one where her and Rick reunite, and she literally has zombies pulling the wagon as if they were oxen. So
yeah. But the extra cool thing being that, as a trioxin zombie, it is a person, um, which creates some interesting ethical situations that I think is really fascinating. You know, you have your sort of monster companion you got to keep under wraps, but you can also theoretically have a conversation with it.
yeah, so in the first film, the outbreak was insane. Like it really just ravaged that entire town, and they kind of had to nuke it in order to sort of get rid of the zombies, or did they? But by the time you got to the third movie, Nick, the military almost kind of had a handle on it, um, and had the ability to control zombies with these, nullifiers. I can't remember what you call them in the game, and of course these harnesses that they wear. Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of that and how that is going to play a role in the game itself?
Yeah, sure. So both those forms of technology are present in the third movie, as you say. It's hinted at from the very first film that the army is involved in this. You know, Troxin is originally developed as a kind of a chemical to fight against the war on drugs. It's designed as a herbicide to destroy marijuana crops, and along the way, they find out that it also has this really awesome and scary ability to reanimate the dead. So in the third film, there's two essentially competing technologies which are designed to essentially control the zombies and transform them into bioweapons. You know, things that can be transported around, they can be unleashed, and then they can be sort of like packaged up quite nicely and folded away for another day. So two of those technologies. The first one is the paretic infusion rifle, which is a rifle which essentially fires a sort of cryogenic bullet into the zombie's brain and just freezes it, and then you can put it in a canister and it's ready to be packed away. And the other technology are the exoskeletons. So these are actually a form of armor which the zombies are sort of drilled and screwed into quite painfully, and it not only makes the zombie a little bit more mobile and a little bit more combat ready, but it has a special safety feature at the back where you can just lock the zombie into a position that it can't move. Um, doesn't always work right. I think we've got mechanics in place that things can go wrong with the exoskeleton, with your zombie companion, and it's kind of it's open to you sort of like how you want to interpret this relationship with your zombie companion, right? I mean, does it do what you say because you promise it some brains? Has it had a lobotomy? Is it just, you've got some sort of is it someone that you knew while they were alive, for example? You can explore all those avenues. Um, but yeah, as far as like the military's involvement goes, I mean, those are the two main sort of forms of technology for controlling the zombies, and both of those are wrapped up in that class, which is called the post-mortem technician. And this is essentially an army specialist who knows about zombies, they know about trioxin, they get bonuses to avoid trioxin, they get bonuses to fighting zombies, and they effectively have an unkillable living meat shield that occasionally will do things for them, but not all the time.
All right, so you also let on that that you also created a player class for being a zombie, which is always the first question that comes out of anyone's mouth when they hear about some of our licensed properties is, can I be that? So, as soon as Kong came out, can I play Kong? As soon as Pacific Rim came out, can I play a Jaeger? Can I play a kaiju? So you've already thought about the idea of having the players play these zombies, these triaxon zombies. Can you talk a little bit about that class or that, or is it, I'm sure I guess it's an origin or a class. Can you talk a little bit about that and talk about how that fits within the world?
Yeah, sure. So I originally designed it as a class, but that's because I was ignorant to what an origin is in the sort of context of everyday hero. So Goober was very kind to come on board and say, look, this needs to work as an origin, really. Um, so it was reconfigured as an origin, and we turned the Living Dead class into a new class, which is open to members of the Living Dead origin. So as far as that sort of origin goes, it's essentially, obviously everything's in first draft at the moment. It's essentially a sort of package of bonuses and penalties. So, for example, you get the zombies unkillable nature. So, most damage, you have really good damage resistance to almost all forms of damage. You have your strong, zombies are able to sort of like bite open through skulls to get the brains inside, so they have bonuses to their strength. But you also get, unfortunately, some penalties such as the pain of being dead. So your character is in constant agony from the pain of being dead and gets disadvantages on a bunch of actions and saving throws until they can get access to live brains, and then they can temporarily offset those disadvantages. So it's really a kind of like, I really wanted it to feel like a double-edged sword because it's cool to play as a zombie, but I didn't want to lose the kind of, there's almost a human aspect to the trioxin zombies, that they are people and they are in constant pain, and they're not particularly eating your brains because they're sort of like evil, but they're eating your brains because it's the only thing that they can do to stop this horrible pain. So I really wanted it to feel like it was something that could also be not only a mechanically cool, but also a good role playing opportunity, right? So, and it's also something that you can gain in play. So you could start off with the zombie origin, or if you're exposed to trioxin, you can gain the zombie origin in play as well.
Oh wow, that's kind of cool. And so I've got a couple questions about that, right? I mean, so is the zombie origin a lot like a vampire, where like I can just drink some blood dried blood or some rat blood and I'm fine for a little while, or am I constantly hungry and I'm constantly ravenous and do I always want to be eating brains? And is there any substitute for it? Um, that's my first
So
question.
yeah, so it is a constant pain, and it can be offset by eating brains. So it is quite similar to the analogy that you just said about the vampire. I think it's something like if you eat live human brains, you get something like 1d20 minutes of relief from the pain of being dead,
Just
and
20
that's
minutes. Wow.
1d20 minutes, and
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
That's
so
short.
maximum 20 minutes.
yeah.
Yeah, that feels short to me. Okay.
And obviously, this is all first draft. This is a lot of stuff that we need to really play test. But we didn't want to. I wanted to make sure that this in the film, the zombies are constantly craving brains. It's almost like a drug, especially in the third movie. It's almost like a sort of analogy for a drug addiction, right? So
Hmm.
it needs to be something that is constantly pushing and driving a zombie into action. So you get a little bit of relief from it. It offsets the disadvantages that you get on some of your actions. Like I think zombies get disadvantage on wisdom saving throws and things like that, just because they have this constant niggling pain in the back of their heads. Um, yeah, so I mean, you can get some relief from it, but it's only temporary, and you're going to get back out there and looking for brains. At maximum within 20 minutes of eating a brain. And as far as substitutes go, there are optional rules because the frustrating thing about this franchise is that the first film really firmly establishes the rules of zombies, and then the other
Hmm.
films kind of play around a little bit. So, for example, in the second film, they managed to lure the zombies over to a power plant by using like dead cow brains from a butchery. So we've got optional rules, so you can eat dead brains of animals, and they only offer, at most, a few minutes of relief from the pain of being dead. So there are substitutes, but they're mostly an optional rule because I want to try and keep this as close to the original film as possible.
Do you think that the constant needing to eat brains is going to slow down gameplay, or is there a mechanic for it? So, for example, can I turn it into freeze dried brain jerky so I can snack on it all day long?
I haven't got that far with thinking about substitutes for live human brains because I like zombies and I like the fact that zombies eat brains. But there are certainly there is a character class for zombies, right? It's open only to members of the Living Dead origin, and at the moment, it's got a working class name of Rageful Dead, which is something that will probably change. But this character class is based on the character of Julie Walker from Return of the Living Dead Part 3. And if you've seen that film, she's able to starve off the hunger for brains by inflicting pain on herself. So
Mm,
it's like other forms of pain can reduce or offset the pain of being dead. So that is all
mhm.
factored into this new zombie class we've got, who is capable of like offsetting the pain of being dead. And I think they get bonuses to resist eating the brains of their friends as well. So we can sort of, this is a character that can at least fight alongside the human members of the party for a little bit. But in all likelihood, at some point, that hunger is going to take over, and your friends' brains are going to look just as attractive as any other brains.
All right, next question. You talked about the fact that if you chop off someone's hand, a zombie's hand, the hand now is an independent being trying to still get you. Yeah, as a PC player, what happens when my hand gets chopped off?
Well, that's something that at the moment the player character rules for zombies are exactly the same as the sort of NPC rules for zombies.
Mm.
So, you will get overexposed, you can get cut in half, and then you've got, a pair of independent legs that control. I, I I tend to lean towards, I think we might put somewhere in the document about how to handle overexposure for a player character zombie and when it might be time to sort of call the character quits and have the GM take over that character because suddenly you've got four limbs which are all severed and independent, and the character is essentially unplayable to a certain extent.
Right.
Um, I think one thing I want to touch on, and I haven't. This isn't in the first draft. This is something that's come to me in the meantime. Is if your arm is cut off, technically you should be able to just sew it back on, right? Because it still moves. It can still sort of like articulate itself. So is it possible to have some kind of like Frankenstein where you're made out of bits of different bodies that are all sort of independent together, or can you just sew your head back on? All those things seem doable with trioxin zombies, so that's something that I'm thinking about at the moment.
That's actually a really interesting concept, and I think it actually works really well for this. Primarily because I was wondering, well, what does it grow back? Does it live for But if you could sew it back on and reattach it, then it sort of creates a really nice narrative for the player character.
Yeah, I think one thing to sort of keep in mind when talking about like Living Dead heroes is they're probably not something that you wanna start with in every game. Like having that
Uh,
as a player option, you can just I'm playing a zombie. Is something that'll be really really cool for certain adventures, and for others would just not work at all. But it's always there in case somebody gets infected,
mm,
which I think is super cool. So even if you're not like letting players start as zombies, if somebody in the midst of an adventure gets infected and becomes a zombie, now here's all the rules for how they're going to deal with it. Um, and most likely, if you're playing a zombie, I feel like it's not going to be that long term. Being able to play a zombie from a level 1 to level 10 full campaign is possible. Um, but I feel like most of the time that's not going to happen. Um, because once you're out of that, like, maybe you're in a combat situation and there's enemies, enemy soldiers you're killing, and you can eat their brains and stuff. But like once that like adventure is over, um, it's going to be hard to keep that character going, and they're a constant risk to their allies, and they might be getting real messed up by taking various damage and everything. So I think it as a player, it's important to kind of think of your zombie hero as maybe a little bit more temporary, except for very specific circumstances. Maybe you're doing the rageful class, and so you have a better control of yourself over time. But just like some character, but also they're a zombie, is maybe best seen as a ticking time bomb, or slowly disintegrating sort of creature.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So we got a question from the audience, which is within the game, how are characters exposed to or infected by the trioxin? So you talked about the fact that it's not transmitted by bite, and it's also a little interesting, right? Like in the first movie, they didn't know how it was transmitted, and we learned a lot about how it was transmitted. So Nick, how is the infection transmitted?
So trioxin interacts with living beings and dead beings in a different way. Essentially, the end result is always a zombie, but the trioxin will interact with a living host and a dead host in two different ways, and we've basically broken it down into two different forms. So we have direct trioxin and we have indirect trioxin. So direct trioxin is when you are exposed to the pure form of the gas, right? It's a weaponized chemical. It's it's put in special canisters and weapon forms by the government, and any exposure to it immediately infects you with the exposes you to the chemical. You do get a saving throw. The saving throw is pretty brutal, especially against direct trioxin. Against indirect trioxin. So when I say indirect, I mean trioxin that's been filtered through the environment in some way. So if you go back to the first film, when they burn the first zombie, because they think that's the great way to get rid of it, the trioxin from that zombie's body goes up into the environment and it becomes part of the rain, and it comes down as acid rain. In game terms, that would be what we call indirect trioxin. Indirect trioxin does not turn a living being into a zombie. It just hurts them. I think you take like acid damage from it. Any amount of trioxin, whether it's direct or indirect, if it comes into contact with a corpse, it will reanimate that corpse as a zombie. And that's whether it's a human cadaver, whether it's an animal, whether it's an insect, it all gets reanimated instantly. If you're a living being, you get infected with, sorry, I keep saying infected, you get exposed to trioxin, you gain a new condition, the zombification condition. It works very similar to the exhaustion, sorry, the exhaustion condition. And essentially, your living character then goes through the stages of death, but they're conscious for it. So you start feeling rigor mortis, you start feeling the blood pool up in your body, you start feeling all these horrible things that actually happens to a corpse, but you're conscious for it, right? You're alive during that period. Typically speaking, it takes around about an hour or two for the process to complete, and then you are now a member of the living dead. You have the living dead origin. You're no longer a living person. You are now living dead.
Awesome. That's great. So I'm very excited that we have with us Steve Walsh, who is the owner of the Living Dead Media Group that makes the Living Dead movies. And we're going to try to get him up on stage here. So, Steve, I don't know if you're hearing me, but I just invited you to stage. And
yeah,
hey,
there you
are.
Hey. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to the owner of Living Dead Media and the creator of the Return of the Living Dead franchise, Mr. Stephen Walsh. Steve, nice to see you.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. We're also streaming on Twitch, just to let you know as well. So,
All right. Well, this is my first time on Discord. I had to prove I was human more than once, but I passed.
You're not a zombie then?
I guess not. I was able to correctly identify some rhinos and put some diagonal things in the right order. So I don't know if zombies can do that.
I don't know. We were saying trackside zombies are pretty smart.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think they
well,
could.
maybe they could pass the "Are you a rhino?" test or match these rhinos. But I was able to, so glad to be here.
Oh, glad to have you as well. So we were just talking about a couple of the mechanics that were going on in the space, but now that you're here, we would love to turn it a little bit on the franchise. So it'll be in August will be the 40th anniversary of the film franchise, and in
Yeah,
December you're coming off the brand new film.
yeah, that's correct. Long time in the making. We're obviously very excited about it. Um, I mean, I assume everyone here has some ideas of like what we're doing and why we're doing it. If anyone has some questions specifically, I'd love to, answer that. The kind of the gist of the movie, if you haven't seen it, we're not, obviously we're not trying to put everything out there at once, but the film, so the original film, even though it came out in '85, took place, in July of '84. So this new film, uh, it takes place in '85. So 18 months, Christmas of '85. So 18 months after the events of the first film is where we find ourselves, small town, Pennsylvania. Um, and it's Christmas, Christmas Eve, and there's a blizzard, and chaos ensues, right? So that's kind of like the palette we're going to play with. So we will be in that world. A lot of people got confused when we said it was 18 months after the original, but it takes place in '85, and you got to remember that first title card that comes up, which is July 3rd, 1984, is when the movie takes place. So that's the world we're living in. There was a lot of talk. A lot of people were thinking it'd be easier or better or whatever to set this film in present day. And we do have lots of stories that could be told in present day, but I just really wanted, I thought the fans, everyone I talked to, would be more excited if we were setting this, in the '80s and kind of keep it closer to the original. So that's where we're living at. And obviously, snow and zombies and just all made sense in my mind, and Christmas is fun. It's almost like a subgenre, having Christmas horror films, so we hope to do all that justice.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So much to unpack here. So I want to start with the original film. The original film has left an indelible mark on the film industry, let alone the zombie franchises out there. And like as you just look back over the last couple decades, what are you just amazed about how enduring this brand has been?
Yeah, especially since, like, we can be honest, there hasn't been a film that for this franchise that people have really resonated with. I mean, maybe part three, back in the early '90s, but like it's really most of the love is for this original film, which is, going on 40 years old, and it didn't get, like a lot of the other big franchises, a new film or reboot every 2, 3, 4 years for the last 30, 40 years. And yet it's like, you ask anybody, I mean, like, forget about just zombie films, like a lot of big horror fans, this is like a top film, just bar none, or their top five film, or their film that they love to watch the most for fun. It's just I think it was a lot of lightning in the bottle, right time, right place. It hit a lot of people in, like, a sweet spot that just made him fall in love with the characters in the film. And it was a new kind of zombie, so that was novel. It kind of like redefined the whole zombie thing. I always try to point out to people, if you ask anyone on the street, what do zombies eat? They'll say brains. Well, like in these movies, like there's not, it's like there's not another big zombie franchise or TV show or anything that's like, they're always, it's flesh, it's whatever it is. But yet, there's birthday cakes and Hallmark cars and just pop culture in general. Zombies eats brains, and that was kind of like the brainchild of Dan O'Bannon. In this one, like at the time, relatively, like, it was a light base hit, but it wasn't like, didn't make $1 billion, but it really just affected people, and they just loved it, and it really got into '80s pop culture. I think more people that even if they haven't seen it, they recognize the Troxon barrel. A zombie saying more brains. It's like I know what that's from or what that's about. Just even the colors of the poster. The poster is super popular. Like everyone recognizes it. All those things. So I think that's and then I think the big thing is it was enjoyable. Even if you thought it was scary, you liked it. You liked the characters. They said interesting things. It's like the soundtrack. Everything just kind of worked to make you like have an impression. Fast forward today, there's so much that you can watch and see, and it doesn't leave any impression. You watch a movie and you forgot everything about it like the minute you turn off your phone. It's just not the same kind of thing. And I think people love to quote this film and think this film and rewatched it, and so it's fun. It's fun to kind of give it new life. We've been at this for going on 8 or 9 years. And there, for lots of various reasons, there was no social media, there was no merch, there's no nothing, no new prospects, nothing in the works. When we took it over and kind of just built it all, where it should be, and probably always should have been. And it's a lot of fun to, we just grow more fans and more stuff and more opportunities year after year. And then, now we're going to start taking into like new content and new stuff. And I think that's going to really just be fun for the big fans, but also new fans will like see it and then they'll go back and watch the previous films that maybe they never saw. So at least that's the idea. Yeah.
So, by the way, Nick Lowe had to leave. He had a bit of an emergency at home, so he apologizes. But really, really happy to have Nick on the call. So, Steve, yeah, I mean, it's so interesting, right? Just from the perspective of how it has endured, and I think that that iconic poster, for example, is really, really is immediately memorable every single time you see it of the first movie, as well as the kind of characters that were in the first film. But let's talk about like just the love of love of Tarman, like just in terms of breakout characters and iconic characters, a la Chucky or other iconic characters. Tarman has really endured in and of himself.
Yeah, so I think it's like it was the first time a zombie, like ever, like said something cool, and then people like, oh my god, I mean, he basically has like a couple lines. It's like it's like more brains, live brains. He's not he doesn't have a lot of vocab, but I think just people just loved everything about that, and it was so much different and weird. It just worked and people fell in love with them. And, it's like, yeah, I mean, everyone loves Tarman. Like, he can be in any form, on anything. And people love the hell out of Tarman. So that's, it was a challenge for the new movie. Like, what do you do about a Tarman, or Tarman? Obviously in like part two, it's a different Tarman and it's kind of the same, but it's different. And we didn't want to, rehash what he already was. So I went to Tony Gardner and we developed it for like over a year. We've been like working on like, what is this going to be? And the idea was just like true to the original, but scarier and more realistic is where we kind of came out. At different times in this film, he will be frozen, so not gooey. I really like the idea of playing with like what does his eyes being frozen mean? Icicle claws, like you saw in the teaser trailer. That won't be his only form because he's not always frozen. But like playing with those ideas, but not wanting to like try to copy the original and just change it. I think that's kind of what they did for part two. I just kind of wanted to make our own thing, but still harken back. And that was one of the cool things about getting Tony on board. Like his first movie was Return of the Living Dead 40 years ago. Did the Hap corpse, and he's big time now. He does all the Chuckies, he does all that stuff. But for him, it's just like being able to work on Return of the Living Dead and 40 years later, it's just like it's a labor of love for him too. So we're getting his like decades of experience and just his best stuff. And we gave a little bit away, but barely even showed you Tarman's face or how he can move and the things. And there'll be more to be seen for that. But I'm really excited about like Alex playing him and the way we designed him and like some of the things he can do and can't do. It's gonna be a lot of fun, I think, for the fans, and I think they'll appreciate that we try to stay true to like how they did it and like the methods and it's all practical, but not just trying to give you the exact same thing, and like recreate it. Like that's my like whole thing for the whole movie. We want to pay homage and give something that people will like, but not try to just rehash, recreate, update the things they did in that film. I think everyone hates that stuff. So it's like it'll rhyme, but it won't be the same. And I think that'll give us something that's really cool that everyone can enjoy.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, an official trailer dropped a month or two ago, and you can find it on YouTube. Just type in Return of the Living Dead, and you can see the official trailer that Steve's talking about here.
Yeah, or just go to returnoflivingdead.com.
Even better.
Yeah, you can get all the. There's a lot of there's actually a lot of behind the scenes stuff with like Tony, like one of our first like the actor that plays Tarman, Alex Ward, and Tony going through some of the first ideas. We just put that on the website, kind of like initial like we're trying to figure out how to do the head in particular. Doing it in a way that we could make it something that he could wear that we wouldn't have to like remove his nose with like VFX or CGI or something. And I really like, I never wanted to do that route. So we came up with something that would work really well. But like, yeah, there's a lot of things on the website besides the teaser, just like some of like behind the scenes stuff and kind of where we've been and where we're going.
Great. So we talked a little bit with Nick about how all this came about, and he approached you himself, talking about creating a game, and he said that you were like, I don't even know what these games are. Tell me about like how your journey of getting from a random person reaching out to you about writing a tabletop role playing game to where we are now.
Yeah, so I mean, my approach in general, so again, going back like 8 years ago, in the olden times of 2016, was kind of like I looked at the landscape and like there wasn't anything for Return of the Living Dead. I wanted, and my goal was like everywhere there's doing anything cool with horror or pop culture, I want to be, and I want to push it and do things that people are not doing. And we've done a lot of both. And yeah, we've been looking for like a board game, a role playing game for a long time, but like that's not my thing. I don't do it myself. But I wanted to find a good partner that like seemed like I really loved it. Obviously Nick is that and really had a good beat on it and passion for it. I mean, like all the stuff we do, whether it's action figures or t-shirts or whatever, like the people that create this stuff, like Fright Rags and Trick or Treat Studios and NECA and like, somewhere there's someone working there, an artist, a sculptor, whoever it is, and they love the film, they love for the genre. So I'd like to try to connect with people that I know that are just like they're not doing it just like, hey, we need to make an action figure. It's like we love this, this property, and we want to do it justice and make everything about it awesome. And then like by doing that, then I know the fans are gonna, like to get a huge fan like Randy Falk at NECA is just couldn't be a bigger, fan of, Tarman and the property, the movies. So like everything he designs is like comes from a place of love, and that then translates, then the fans that also love it are going to get something awesome they like. And I feel like with Nick is the same kind of thing. Like he's, he's gonna knock it. I mean, he would not only he'd probably do it for free, he'd probably pay me just to be able to write it. Like, he's just such a big fan and like just he, basically the minute we talk, so like I'm gonna start working on it. So I'm really excited to, read the final thing. And I think in turn the fans will really love it and appreciate it and be excited to play it.
Yeah, I'll tell you that he turned in the first 40 pages of manuscript before we even signed our contract. So
exactly. Yeah. And that's what I want. Like, I mean, I try to work with people that like really love it. And they're not doing it just because like, hey, we make whatever widget. It's like we make this thing because we love this thing, and like Craig over at like Paul Bearer Press, and he's doing his like Catholic kids, basically like bobbleheads. He's doing it because he just loves the idea of like we just did like the poster zombies as like a bobblehead, and just like because of course like there has to be this like two-headed bobblehead poster zombie thing, and of course people eat it up. They're like, it's like a lot of none of this stuff. Maybe the games, but a lot of the stuff is it's not a need in the hunter gatherer sense of the world. It's a want. You got to see it and go like, oh fuck, take my money. I have to have that thing. I have to have that bobblehead. Like it's that kind of reaction. It's not. You don't feed your kids with it. It's just like you see it and like I have to have that. I have to show my friends that I want to touch it. So that's always what we're kind of going for. Just like, I mean, how many Tarman t-shirts do you need? Apparently a lot of them. But like they got to be cool. They got to come from an artist that really loves it and wants to make something cool because there's been 1,000 of them, and that's what we go for. Like, all right, what's the next really cool thing that a bunch of fans go like, oh man, I have to have that too. That's really cool. I never thought about it that way, or so it's a lot of fun. I mean, that's what we do every day. Like every single Return of the Living Dead thing that anyone sees was either created by me or designed or approved by me. It came across my desk. Like, I'm the one saying, hey, let's do this. Let's make this different on the packaging. Let's like, what if we did this? And it's a lot of fun.
That's great. And so, one of your most successful partnerships, I have a little thing here. One of your most successful partnerships is with Super 7 and all the really cool stuff they do. This is their D&D series, which I picked up the whole line. But that's been probably one of your most successful sort of licensing relationships.
Yeah, they just keep making more. Like we keep selling out. We got a really cool new version coming out next year of like all of them. But I think what's crazy and speaks to like we were talking about, like people recognize the poster and all that, like it's so iconic. There's I can't think of any other example on any kind of like movie of any genre where there's something on a poster that's not in the movie that you could sell and make multiple like action figures for. Like NECA has them, Super 7, Paul Bearer Press. We got some more in the works. Like the fact that like people love and will like snag up the poster zombies, they're only on the poster, is crazy. And that's just like it speaks to just people just like that poster is iconic and people love the property and just like whatever they can get. But the fact that we've done the poster zombies in regular black light, glow in the dark. We have another version coming. Is pretty crazy. And it's like again, same thing. It's like I don't think I think people are just buying them to have them and put them on their shelves. I don't think people are like playing with them like the way we played with like Star Wars figures when we were kids or whatever. I think there's just more of like I just want that and I want to have it because it's available and I'm going to put it on my shelf with my other things I think are cool. And that's kind of a lot of times what we have in mind, it's like, how can we make something cool that's a little different? But the fact that like the poster zombies are just like their own thing and people love them is pretty crazy.
So getting back to the game really quickly, like if there's any one thing you want the game to accomplish for your fans, what would that one thing be?
One thing, I think just to enjoy it, like feel like it gives them something a little new, something like a different way to experience the movie or the characters or the world of Return of the Living Dead, and enjoy it. Like just like all right, this is a new way. I think if it does that, people will like really want it and they'll tell their friends about it. And like, and if there's a secondary thing, like if there's people that play games and like this stuff, but are not super familiar, it'd be cool if they can play it and enjoy it and then like want to know more and like go back to watch the movie or, watch the new movie or those kind of things. But, I think you guys are going to do an awesome job. And like, that's what I would want for just like, so people go like, all right, this is really cool. I'm glad they did this, which is kind of a high bar. A lot of times, for things people love, they take like the fans will have a very seemingly they feel like an ownership over it and they don't want you to do something they don't like. So like if you get them to like, all right, now this is in the cool book. I like this thing too. I'm glad you did it. I think then we did our job.
That sounds. Yep, I totally agree, and I don't think Nick and Goober are going to disappoint. They walk through a couple of really neat features here that we've seen, that we've heard of, that are very, very cool. So without a doubt. Well, Steve, I know you only have a small percentage of time, and I appreciate you devoting this in the middle of working out and heading to brunch. But I wanted to thank you. I can't thank you enough for hopping on and just answering a couple questions.
Yeah, anytime. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, and Kasana wants to
I have
say.
one final question for you.
Oh, go ahead.
Are you going to play the game once it's ready?
Yeah, definitely, 100%.
All right,
It
we'll
would be
get
really
that.
fun to have Nick run a game for like the three of us.
Yeah, I'm down. I'll do my best to win.
And maybe your Tarman character could come on too, and he could play. That'd be fun.
Yeah, Alex.
Yeah. One of the people in the audience wanted to let us know that the original movies are on Tubi right now. So if you want to watch them, you can catch them on Tubi.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, Steve, thank you so much. Goober, thank you so much. Audience, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the con. Take care.